It's just preparing the live stream. Strangely, there we go. Okay, I think we are. It's just preparing the live stream. And I'll mute that. Okay. Strangely, the internet seems to be worse up here in London than it is down at the house, and the coast.
So many people using it in London, isn't it?
Possibly, yeah. It can be a little bit intermittent. Anyway, so hello everybody. Good evening. I am Renee from Your Wellbeing Collective. I'm trying to get myself back to the Zoom screen. There we go. and we're here today on Canada Day. Yes, happy Canada Day, everybody. Even though we're in the UK, with Roz. Talk about, get the astrology stuff going again. So I'm actually going to hand it straight over to Roz while you get talking, Roz. I am going to get a link over into the Facebook group. So I'm going to hand it over to you, darling. Okay.
Okay. Hello. I'm Roz Kay. I'm on Facebook as Roz Kay. And I'm here with the Your Wellbeing Collective today, looking at the theme for the month. If you've seen in the Your Wellbeing Collective group, over June, there's been yoga sessions, Tai Chi, there's healing sessions surrounding grounding and balancing. And coming up in July, there's going to be further sessions surrounding the art of letting go. And so the focus for June and July in Your Wellbeing Collective is the root chakra. And I'm here today to talk about how astrology and the knowledge of your chart can help with root chakra issues. So before we get started, if you're watching this within the Zoom group, if you feel like you want to ask some questions or share some experiences, feel free to do so. Just note that I can't see you. So if you want to ask a question, just unmute yourself and ask away. If you're watching in the Facebook group or on YouTube, then please do leave a comment in the Facebook group on the post on the Facebook group, and I'll get back to you in the comments with any questions or to discuss any issues going on there. If you don't want to discuss anything personally, please feel free to message me on Facebook. It's Rosanne, ROZANNE.K.7, or email rosanne.k@gmail.com. So I am a spiritual coach and astrologer, and I use astrology with all my coaching because it provides a really clear map for each individual. So following the themes, Your Wellbeing Collective, we're working through the chakras each month. And the focus this month, the past 2 months, is the root chakra. So if you're new to the chakra system, let's just give a brief overview of what the chakra system is. And then we'll look specifically at the root chakra before moving on to the astrology. So if you're completely new to the chakra system, what is it? It's like a spiritual nervous system. The chakras, we tend to focus on the major 7 chakras. There are more, but we tend to focus on the major 7, which run from the base of the spine up through to the top of the head. And the word chakra means in Sanskrit wheel, circle, or disc, and it's like a spinning vortex of energy. So it's an energy center that connects our physical body through to the different layers of our aura and our energy system. So quick overview of what the chakra system is there. So the root chakra, as we said, the chakra system starts at the base of the spine. Root, clue there in the name, it is the base chakra. Location, if you imagine from the perineum area, if you imagine sort of a cone shape of energy, swirling energy, coming out from that perineum area going downwards, that's where the energy center is located. It's associated with the color red, and the symbolism for it is a lotus flower with 4 petals coming out of it, and the element is earth. So already there we've got some clues as to what that is about with the color red, the number 4, and the element. So number 4 being about structure and stability, and the color red being about drive and danger as well. So the root chakra, it's known as the seat of Kundalini energy. So it's where the energy comes up from, up the spine and up out the top of the head. Many people engage in different spiritual practices, be it forms of yoga or breath work or Tai Chi, to raise this energy up. And when that happens, when that goes up through and out the crown of the head, that's when people experience a form of enlightenment. Now, the root chakra is incredibly important for this, in that it provides the foundation for all of the energy centers above it. And just like the foundation of anything, if that's not solid and stable, it's like a house of cards, the rest come falling down. You do hear of people trying to open their third eye or the crown chakra without having a solid root chakra energy center in place. And doing that, you can run into some problems. So I have seen people in the spiritual community sort of overly focused on the upper chakras to try and experience things like astral projection or telepathy or lucid dreaming, things like that, and tend to forget about these lower chakras. And so I just want to stress how important it is. It provides the foundation for everything above it. And if it's unstable, if it's unbalanced, or if it's lacking in any way, it compromises that whole system. So effectively, it's the center of our emotional and spiritual balance. It connects us. And so in that, what it's concerned with is our survival needs and instincts, all those basic needs that we have, our physical health and well-being, the things that help us thrive, security, safety, our support and physical foundations, both materially and personally and emotionally. It's what grounds us to stability. So materialistically, this can include things like our basic needs for survival. Things such as food, water, shelter, safety, having a roof over our head, and the community within us, feeling safe within that community. And in the modern world, that also includes money and our ability to earn. Because without money in the modern world, then we can't survive. We need the money to buy the food, to pay for the water bills, to keep the roof over our head. So I personally include money in that root chakra center. Psychologically and emotionally, again, sort of the feelings of safety, security, stability, worthiness, our sense of belonging, our commitment to self-preservation, how well we look after ourselves, whether we feed ourselves, look after our personal hygiene, keep ourselves safe, whether we put ourselves in danger or not. And so the attitudes that we have in relation to ourselves, in relation to all of those things. It also sort of looks at our ability to handle conflict and how we handle conflict. And again, sometimes when conflict arises, we can quite easily self-sabotage through how we handle that. And again, with that sort of assertive energy that's involved with conflict, the root chakra also governs things like motivation, determination, our sense of will and drive, our physical and emotional and mental strength. And whether we feel powerful or powerless or somewhere in between, whether we feel connected or disconnected, be that to ourselves, to the earth, to our home, our family, and our local community. And also, again, bringing the money into it in the materialistic sense of the root chakra, the psychological and emotion sense of that is whether we have an abundance or a poverty mindset, and whether that goes to extremes or not. And also a big thing psychologically and emotionally is letting go, which is going to be covered in the next month's sessions of yoga and Tai Chi and healing. So one of the big things it's concerned with letting go of is fear. So fear is quite often the root of all imbalances. It's a fear of something. So letting go of that fear and the ability to do so. So physically, in the physical body, the root chakra, it rules our adrenal glands, and that's that fight-flight response. So again, overactive, if we have too much, if the adrenal glands are too active, the body gets dumped with adrenaline, and we're ready to fight or flight, and that fight-flight instinct kicks in, all again about survival. And if that adrenaline's got nowhere to go, then it can actually cause problems within the body. It also governs parts of the reproductive system, the spinal column, the kidneys, and the skeletal system and the bones. So again, it's that structure. And also elimination and the bowels and the anus. So problems with root chakra stuff is all related to those sorts of things. So big problems, arthritis, the bones, problems with the bones, arthritis, particularly in the hips, legs and feet are associated with the root chakra. And again, elimination, so going to the toilet or the ability to do so, constipation. And again, we can look at that sort of physically, but also psychologically, getting rid of toxins. So the ability to get rid of toxins from the body physically, but also, again, mental and emotional toxins, poisonous things, thoughts, feelings, attitudes, behaviors, beliefs. The ability to get rid of those is all root chakra stuff. So when the root chakra is overactive, so that cone is massive, swirling massively, that red cone, this is indicated by somebody who's perhaps, you might see them as overly greedy. They're too focused in materialistic gain, possibly too resistant to change, very, very rigid, and also potentially very self-interested or narcissistic to the extreme. And if the root chakra is underactive, again, the opposite of there, they might be too flighty, too subject to change, easily knocked off balance. They may suffer from quite severe anxiety or fearfulness, and also things like self-care. Without an active, healthy, balanced root chakra, somebody might stop showering, stop washing, stop feeding themselves properly, are just not enough concern for the material world. So when it's in balance, we have the right amount of will, the right amount of drive. So being assertive without being aggressive, for example. I think the same with physical, emotional, and mental strength. There's a balance there, and the assertion and courage, the courageousness, but without being reckless. That's when it's in balance. Again, self-care. You look after yourself, but without being too self-interested, too many selfies taken, but you look after yourself. And also the ability to have healthy boundaries, being connected with the community, but without a codependency, without being too dependent upon the community. So again, it's all about the balance. So that's a brief overview of the root chakra. So how does astrology relate to all this? I'm just going to have a sip of water before I go into that. So astrology, it's your map to your psyche, to your soul, to your path through this life. And this can help us find how issues related to all those things we've just discussed in the root chakra, how our attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs about those issues were formed, either in early childhood or going back even into past lives, what we're bringing into this life with us. Were we particularly unstable in our root chakra, or too stubborn, too grounded in our root chakra, too materialistic in past lives, and we're bringing that into this life, in which case we probably have to experience the opposite of that. It's all part of the learning process. So your natal chart, it is that map. It shows us the energy that you came into this life with. It shows us how the different energies interact, how they may present, what areas of life they may present in. So, for example, we can see from a natal chart whether you were born with energies that were predominantly over or underactive in root chakra, or all the chakra issues. We can also look through the chart as to how to create balance in that, and simply by being aware of where the energy has come from, or what's informed the energy or the attitude, the behavior or the belief. Being aware of that can help us to create change. And this is what the astrology does. It shows us that awareness. It also can show us how the energies play out through life. So as the planets are transiting now in the sky, whether they're making interactions to your natal planets, particularly the personal planets, the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter. If there's any particularly outer planets, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, and Saturn, if they're making interactions at any given time, it's going to create different energies in your life. So we can see through the transits whether there's any root chakra issues being brought up to the surface to be looked at, to be healed, and to be brought into balance. And we can see from the events that are happening, we can then look at the transits and go, okay, well, this energy, this is the energy that's playing out here, and then learn how to create balance within that. And so those transits will bring about everyday stresses, be that relationship issues or unexpected hardships such as losing your job, shocks, traumas, things like that, things that destabilize us. And the astrology, looking at those transits and how they're interacting with our natal planets, can tell us what we're being taught in this, what we can learn from these events in our lives. So in the natal chart, things to look out for. If you haven't had a natal chart printed, you can do so at various websites online. I think on the events page on the Your Wellbeing Collective page, there is a link to one place where you can get your natal chart printed out. You will need your date and place, and if possible, time of birth. We can get clues as to root chakra issues without the time of birth. However, there's a lot more detail with the time of birth. If you're a bit vague at the time of birth, then if it's within sort of half an hour, go for it. Maybe split the difference and put it in. If it's any more than that, then I would just put it down as an unknown time of birth. Simply because the chart changes a degree every 4 minutes. So there's 30 degrees within a sign. So as you can imagine, that moves through the chart pretty quickly, a degree every 4 minutes. So if you don't have the time of birth, leave it out. It's absolutely fine. There are other ways of looking at it. So the first thing I personally would look at for things like rooting or grounding are the elements. So if you get a copy of your natal chart, you will have all the planets, you will have all the signs, and we are all of it. Every one of us is every sign of the zodiac and every planet. How we are individual is the conversations those planets are having with each other, so the aspects that they make to one another, where those planets land in the sign, and what house those planets land in. And it's the time of birth that gives us the house system. So without that, you'll still be able to see which element the planets land in. So looking at all the different planets, particularly the personal planets, so again, the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, but also the outer planets, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And if you have the time of birth, what's called the angles, the ascendant, which is where the horizon is at the time of birth, where the sun rises, on the east, and what's called the midheaven, and that is a point. It's not always at direct right angle. Sometimes it's off at an angle like that. Means top of the sky, and so that MC is quite often known as those angles as well, if you've got them. And look to see which element the majority of the planets are in, or if they're equally spread out, and where they all are. So fire signs, you've got Aries, Leo, Sagittarius. What planets have you got in fire signs? What angles have you got in planet signs? Earth, Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn. Again, what planets and what angles are there? Air signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. Again, look to the planets that are in that. And water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. So all the elements do affect the root chakra, but I'm going to focus predominantly on the fire and the earth, because in terms of that drive and that will and that groundedness, fire and earth is the key. So look to where the planets are. What planets do you have in fire signs and in earth signs? How many planets do you have in fire signs and earth signs? So say, for instance, you have nearly all your planets in fire. That will be a massive overemphasis of fire energy. So in that, you will have far too much will, far too much drive, far too much assertion. And similarly, if you have no planets in there, you'll have the opposite of that. There'll be no get up and go, no ability to assert yourself without somebody giving you a big push. If there's a balance, again, you've got the balance. You're driven without being too driven. You're assertive without being too driven, without being aggressive with it. And again, earth. So if you have the majority of planets in your earth, this can make you too grounded, so too cautious, too predictable, too habit driven, too rigid. Essentially, it's like, if you imagine earth, it's like you're up to your waist in it. You can't really move. And if, again, you have very little planets, very few planets in earth signs, that can create an impracticality or a poor sense of your material needs. And again, that lack of grounding. Again, it very, very much depends on the planet. So if you only have one planet in Earth and that planet is the sun, then that kind of changes that balance a little bit, because the sun, it's the planet, it's our purpose, it's our self in the world. So that one planet and the rest in fire, that one planet will sort of increase the odds quite a lot. The same with the moon, and then it goes down. The further out into the solar system you get, the less sort of power, well, not power, that's not quite the right term, but the less emphasis you give to that planet in the elements. So yeah, first of all, that's where I would begin, looking at the elements. Where are the planets in relation to fire, earth, air and water, and particular focus on fire and earth. And what do you do about that? Well, if you find that you have all your planets in a fire sign, be conscious of that and check in with yourself. Check in with, well, am I being too aggressive? Am I being too assertive? And perhaps have water around you. Spend time in and near water. Quite simple, opposite balancing. Okay. The next thing I would look at in a chart is the modes. And again, you can look at this without knowing the time of birth. And the modes, again, it's where the signs are in relation to the seasons. And again, there's a lot of root chakra stuff within this, as well as other chakras, but it's quite heavily root focused, to be honest, in terms of drive and will and groundedness and ability to let go, ability to be flexible, things like that. So again, in the same as before, looking at where those planets are, how many do you have in cardinal signs, fixed signs, or mutable signs? And where is the majority of your planetary energy situated? So the cardinal signs, this is like the beginning of a new season. So Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. So as you can see, the beginning of a new season, it's a new start. So if there's an overemphasis of these cardinal energies, a person would have quite a good initiative, a very good drive, a really good starter, but perhaps not so good at finishing things. And so again, being aware of that and being conscious of it is how we can start making change, or look at opposite energies and bring them in somehow. And again, if there's very little cardinal energy, so very few planets in cardinal signs, the person may lack initiative and drive and not really have any willpower. Again, very difficult to get things started. And as the opposite, they may be able to finish things really, really well, providing somebody else started them. And so if there's a balance there between the modes, then the person will have a healthy sense of drive and initiative. And we can see where the planets are, and then we can look to create the balance, because very, very few of us in our natal charts will have a perfect balance in any of the energies. So that's the cardinal energies. Now, fixed energies, we've got Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And these are the signs that are the height of the season. So like Leo, it's the height of summer. It's where the sun's at its highest, well, the hottest in its sky. So that's right in the middle of the season. So it's very fixed, very, well, Leos are quite known for their stubbornness. Yeah. So if the majority of the planets are in fixed signs, so a lot of energy focused there, the person may well be very, very resistant to change, very stubborn. And I've also written down here the words retentive and constipated. So again, this is how sort of physiologically it can affect us. I'd be interested to look at the charts of people who suffer things from like constipation and look at, you know, where is the energy focused? Is it focused so much on fixed signs? And again, if there's very little fixed sign energy, the person they'll really struggle to stand their ground. They'll be easily pushed over, so to speak. So when the fixed energies, astrological energies, are in balance, a person is firm but open to change. So they can stand the ground, they've got those healthy boundaries, but they're adaptable. They can change if need be. And finally, in terms of the modes, mutable signs. So what energies do you have in Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces? Look to the planets that you've got in any of those signs. And if there's any energy there, if there's too much energy there, again, sort of going back to the seasons, mutable, these are the changing of the seasons. So it's like towards the end of the season before we kickstart the new season. So again, like if there's too much energy in this mutable sign, the person can be ungrounded, a bit of a leaf in the wind, really, quite indecisive, ungrounded, inability to make decisions, leaving things to other people to tell them what to do, basically. And if there's an under-emphasis in mutable, the person can be too rigid, lacking flexibility. And so again, you can see how all these modes sort of balance one another out over time. And when we work with them consciously through looking at the chart, we can create extra and further balance in it. So with the mutable signs, essentially, the person, the person is adaptable to change. So that's looking at the modes. Now, the next section you will need the time of birth for. And this, I'm going to have a sip of water again. So if you're looking at your natal chart and you have put the time of birth in, you will see a line across the middle. That is the horizon at the time of your birth. So over towards the left-hand side, looking at it, that's the eastern horizon, so where the planets come up and rise from. And on the right-hand side of the page, looking at it, that's the western horizon, where the planets set. And within that, you then have the other angles, which I mentioned previously, the MC, or the midheaven, and the IC, the Imum Coli, which literally is Latin for top of the sky and bottom of the sky. They are really, really important angles in astrology. And within that, you will have different, they'll be carved into sections, into house numbers. So you'll have house 1, 2, 3. So from the eastern horizon, you'll have the first house just below that. And it'll go right round to the 12th house, just above the eastern horizon. So how these modes, the hemispheres here, can help us in terms of root chakra issues. Again, they can help by looking at the chart and seeing where the majority of the planets are located. So again, if we split it into quarters, we've got the northern hemisphere, which is actually the bottom half of the chart. So you've got the horizon across the middle, and then you've got the planets 1 to 6 at the bottom. That is the northern hemisphere, and then everything above that, so houses 7 through to 12, we've got the southern hemisphere. And then I wouldn't personally go, well, it depends on the house system you use, but that's getting a bit technical. That assuming that IC-MC angle is at a 90-degree angle, we then split it in half, left to right. So the left half is the eastern hemisphere, and the right half, so the left covers houses 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, the east, and on the west we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 house system. So splitting it north, south, east, west. Now the north, so that below, that covers our personal, our inner world, our home, our family, our roots. So again, we'd look to this section of the chart. The south, the top half, that covers our outer world, our public life. And if all the planets are up there in that upper half, generally speaking, the person has quite a poor sense of inner being. They're focused out there rather than in here. And similarly, if all the planets are below the horizon, the person is a bit too heavily focused in here and not enough focused out there. So inner, outer, the north-south divide. The east-west divide, it's self and other. So on the east, a lot of planets on the eastern hemisphere, and the person will have a very strong personal identity and will be quite self-focused, focused on their own promotion, their own life drive. It's like I create the world is a very eastern hemisphere focus. And the west, if there's a lot of planets to the west, and then that person will tend to live through other people really, and might have quite a weak sense of self, a weak sense of ability to assert themselves, living vicariously through people. So again, sort of looking at where the planets are located in terms of the hemispheres is a really good way to look at where the energies are located. And again, it's not always a good thing astrologically for them to be equally spread across the chart, because again, what tends to happen there is the person is very split and there's no focused attention. The hemisphere is the one thing that we do want quite a lot of energy in a specific section of the chart, because yeah, it's what we put our focus upon. And if all the planets are scattered all around the chart, that person can quite often struggle because there's a bit of energy over there, there's a bit of focus over there, and there's a bit of focus down there. And it's quite hard to pull it all into sort of a focus, a life direction focus. So that sort of moves on to the house system. Again, you will need the time of birth to look at the house system. But in terms of root chakra stuff, we'll quite literally look at the house of roots, which is the fourth house. So that angle, the IC, is usually marked, depending on the house system you use, as the beginning of the fourth house. And that shows us our roots. And also in terms of your psyche, your psychology, your consciousness, it's quite often the part of the consciousness, or it usually is the part of the consciousness that we are least aware of. And also very few people around us are aware of it. It's very inner world, very, very hidden, quite often from ourselves. So all those unconscious attitudes, behaviors and beliefs we can look at. There are other areas of the chart as well, but we can look at the fourth house for that. It also governs our home, and particularly our early years home, and how that creates our center of, our sense of groundedness, our sense of rootedness, as we move through life. The fourth house, again, it looks at our ancestors and our inherited karma. in our DNA. Now, it's known scientifically now that we carry trauma of our ancestors in our DNA. And so this could be seen as sort of ancestral karma. So, for example, if great, 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 great granny lived in absolute poverty, was incredibly unsafe, was being attacked, and frequently struggled to survive, struggled for food, struggled with all those root chakra issues, that will be in our DNA. Those traumas will be in our DNA. And so even if we are living in the lack of luxury, we've got everything we need around us, we've got all the food, we've got all the abundance, we might still struggle with those issues because it's in our DNA. We're carrying them through the ancestral lineage. So the fourth house can help identify things like that. It really is our inner private life, and going backwards in consciousness, backwards in time, backwards in our lifetimes, backwards in the ancestral lineage. And it also just can relate to the mother or the father, depending on which school of astrology that you look at. I tend to look at the whole chart and see what's going on in the rest of the chart and sort of determine whether I'm going to allocate the fourth house as the mother or the father. But yeah, different schools use different things. So again, with the house system, and looking at, again, those survival things, the ability to survive, our ability to earn income. This is all second house stuff. It's the house of value, the house of worth. And again, historically, it's the house of the things that we need to survive. So prior to the existence of the monetary system that we live in today, our ability to grow foods, our ability to thrive physically, is all second house stuff. Now, in modern times, we look at that for our ability to earn income. And again, sort of on a more spiritual level, on the metaphysics of it, we will look at the correlation of that between the person's self-worth, self-confidence, and self-esteem. And within that house, second house as well, our property, our home that we own, the roof over our head, and our ownership of that. So again, we look to these two houses. Again, if I was doing a full chart reading, I would look to lots of other things as well, but just to put this down to an hour session, the fourth house and the second house, look to those houses for root chakra issues. What sign are they in? Even if there's no planets in those houses, it will be in a sign. So on the cusp of the second house, so where that line is in the chart, and on the IC, the cusp of the fourth house, what sign does that fall in? And that will give a clue as to the energy of these issues, the energy of our roots, of our ancestry, of our inner unconscious self, of our foundations. And again, the second house, what sign it is in, will give us an idea as to how we value money, earned income, how we earn our income, how we value our self-worth, how we value ourselves, and whether we, in that value, whether we look after ourselves properly. So just by a way of an example, let's look at an unstable. So somebody with instability in the home life would have perhaps Uranus on the IC or in the fourth house. And if that makes an angle to a personal planet as well, that creates massive instability in roots. And there's always, there is always a spiritual reason for that, for you being born with these energies that we've got. We're learning, we're evolving, we're learning to balance things out. And that doesn't mean to say if you have, for example, Uranus on the fourth house, or Mars there, perhaps, so very fiery energy in the fourth house. That doesn't mean that's it through life at all. It means that's what you've got to work with. That's something you're working out. You're working out how to find groundedness in this life. And again, perhaps past life issues we could look at. You may have come into this life with too much, as we said before, being buried up to the waist in earth, too stubborn, too grounded, too rooted to the spot. So this life you've chosen to sort of move about all over the place to create the balance. So that's one example of an unstable fourth house, unstable sort of childhood home, perhaps. Going to the opposite of that, Saturn on that house, that might be too strict, too many rules, too many regulations, either through the ancestry, with ourselves, with, you know, too strict with ourselves. So again, that going back to sort of the modes and things like that, too stubborn, too solid, too rigid, too grounded. So different planets will have different energies and will create different energies there, and also how those planets interact. Just as an example, if you have the moon in there, I'm just thinking of personal planets now. I looked just at outer planets there, personal planets. The moon, you will feel very emotionally connected to your home, to your roots. You will feel an emotional need to have a sense of groundedness, a sense of root. Depending on the sign that is in, the expression will change from sign to sign. So again, just looking at examples, let's look at the second house, and the house of material value, money. Planets in there that could create change. Say, for instance, you have Neptune in the second house, that will create a sense of uncertainty about material things. Neptune's quite a spiritual planet. It doesn't want to focus on the material. So that will create an uncertainty.
So we seem to have lost Roz there for a minute. I've asked her to unmute. Technology.
Did I disappear?
Your camera disappeared and you muted.
Oh,
okay. It was kind of, what happened there?
I have no idea. I'm going to have a sip of, take the opportunity to have a sip.
Yeah, take the opportunity. And it's actually good. I'm going to say, I've pulled up, although it doesn't look that familiar to me, but then I haven't spent that much time looking at my chart because I don't have my actual printed off chart, my original chart at home, but I've gone to the website and I've got it here. Would it be helpful if maybe if I put that on screen share and you can use that as an example?
Go on, let's have a look. If you don't mind sharing your chart.
I don't mind. It's just, this should be funny, I think, is the way I'm looking at it. Because I think there, can you see that now?
Oh, there we go. Right, okay, so how far back should we go? Right, you can see there, you've got the horizon, the ascendant and the descendant across the middle.
Yeah.
Now you've got Mars, Venus, the Sun, Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, Jupiter, the Moon, all below the horizon. Oh no, sorry, that's Mercury, not Venus. Venus is above the horizon. It's confused me because Mercury is normally yellow. I just saw the green, and so you've got a lot of energy below the horizon. So that shows a very strong inner focus, possibly.
Yeah.
Overly grounded in some, overly rooted. And then above the horizon, you've got Venus up there, which is lovely, in the 11th house, which is lovely, in Leo, which is lovely. So that's, when you go out into the world, it's for the arts, it's for celebration, for social things, but very focused sort of inwardly. That fourth house, so there, it's not quite at a right angle on yours, but it's actually quite close. It depends what time of year as to how much of a right angle that is, but that's it, that's right. The IC, the Imam Coli at the bottom,
yeah,
and that fourth house there in Sagittarius, you've got Neptune right on the IC.
right here.
Now I would put Yeah, that's right. And also Jupiter and Moon in the 4th house, and it looks like Jupiter is just about still in Sagittarius there.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so and your Moon in there, so that there's comfort about being at home, about being in your roots. Ancestrally, Sagittarius is a bit of a gypsy soul. It's a bit of a wanderer. It likes to explore, and Jupiter there, it rules Sagittarius. So again, big exploration. Neptune is the sea. So travel by sea ancestrally might be something that goes on there. It's quite an interesting dynamic, that, isn't it? Because it's like going within, being home, being rooted, but in an energy that wants to go out and explore, that want to travel. And again, and 4th house being sort of roots with Neptune there, it's like the roots are being dissolved. It's like you're never quite sure where the roots are. That makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Completely. Yeah.
So let's look at that 2nd house, the house of sort of earned income in modern times, but historically the ability to get the things we need to survive. So yeah, so
sorry, second is which, where is that?
The 2nd house. So from the ascendant, moving, you've got the numbers and the inner circle. I'm pointing at the screen there as if you can
ascendant,
see me.
yes, here.
Yeah. So you've got the 1st house just below it.
Okay, 1st house.
And then the 2nd house just below that. There's the numbers of the houses in the inner circle.
In here. Okay.
That's it. Yeah. So it looks like your sun's just about in the 1st, doesn't it? Pluto and Uranus making an aspect to Saturn. And the 2nd house is in Virgo. So Virgo, 2nd house, a 2nd house Virgo would like to make sure everything is above board materialistically. It is an earth sign. And with Pluto, and I'm just trying to have with Pluto there, Pluto in a square to Moon. So we'll look at the aspects shortly. It's interesting, you've got that square to the 2nd, 4th house there. Pluto would give, Pluto is power, and Pluto is also wealth. Okay. So Pluto there would give quite a powerful ability to earn, or for those material needs for survival. Now the paradox with that is Pluto is also death and decay. So Pluto is, no, it's just in Libra, but with the 2nd house in Virgo, I might look at that as like quite a healthy awareness of the cyclical nature of those things that we need for survival. So it's not necessary, well, Virgo does like its earthly stuff and it's growing its plants and things, but I put it more as a Taurus thing. But even with it being an earth sign, you know, looking at growing your own food, things like that. And being in Libra, again, there's relationship associated with Pluto in Libra, and relationship associated with that as well. So maybe through community, through the allotment, for example, would be ways in which you can ground and root yourself with that. So I'm not going to go through the modes and the hemisphere and things like that on that. But now another thing, and this is where astrology, it gets really quite complex into the esoteric, and this is the lunar nodes. So yours, looking at that chart, we've got following that house system with the circle numbers. You've got the 5th house there.
Yeah.
That's the north node of the moon, and then opposite it in the 11th house, the south.
Yeah.
Esoterically, the root chakra on your chart is located within 30 degrees either side of that south node of the moon. So if you draw a line sort of going 30 degrees from that south node in Cancer in the 11th house, all that would also cover root chakra stuff. Now, what this is all stuff that we've come into this life with. It's what we find natural. And so for an example there, it's in Cancer in the 11th house. So this would, again, it would be nurturing social groups, being a nurturer within social groups, being the mother of the social groups sort of thing. That's like a natural instinct. And so just as with the chakra system, as we want to sort of get all the chakras in balance and move the energy, get the root chakra in balance and move the energy up through to the crown chakra, north node on the opposite would be the crown chakra. And we literally hack the chart up along that axis to look where each chakra is. So the root would be sort of 30 degrees, which would take it in midway through Leo from just sort of the last 5 degrees of Gemini. So all that section there. So it would cover 10th house, which is outward, public. The 11th house, again, potentially feeling quite rooted and grounded through having social groups. No, it doesn't go into your 12th house, but it will it? 5, 10, it will cover that Venus. So again, that Venus in Leo will be sort of a way to keep grounded. Venus in Leo likes to be sort of, in the 11th house particularly, sort of the shining light of the party, so to speak.
Okay. Not so sure about that. Oh my God, that's funny.
That's just one energy.
Yeah.
Consider when you look at that by comparison to the rest of the energy being below the horizon and being very inward facing, then so it's a good thing you've got that, because you'd be a real hermit without it.
I got that. Yeah. I got that. Oh wow. Okay. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So the planets to look at with the root chakra, planets that rule root chakra are Saturn and Mars. So Saturn governs the structure, the stability, fears as well, the sense of guilt, overly materialistic, under materialistic. So again, so Saturn is structure. So you've got it up there in the 10th house. So again, you will need a sense of structure, and being in Gemini, an intellectual structure within career. So structured to thought processes within career and public image and things like that. And an authority as well. Saturn is an authority. And Mars, again, that governs our drive, our will, and the assertion, our ability to handle conflict. You've got it there, conjunct Mercury in the 1st house. So this is possibly one of the ways that in Scorpio as well. Oh no, in Virgo, sorry. This is one of the ways possibly that in this chart you could feel a little bit destabilized. Mars, Mercury in Virgo could be like an overactive mind, overly analytical, looking at all the different options, analyzing everything too much. And then with that square to Saturn as well, Saturn comes in and goes, stop that. And so again, that brings us to the aspects and how these can play a role in whether we're grounded, whether we're destabilized, things like that. A square, it creates an inner tension, but we tend to think of squares as bad, but quite often they create a dynamic tension which gets stuff done. So I would say it's that square to that Mars, Mercury in Virgo, square to that Saturn in Gemini in the 10th house, that dynamic tension that that square creates is what gives you the ability to get organized, get in front of the camera, get things rolling, get things moving. Whereas in the background, in your mind, it's all going, but you look very rooted, very grounded, very stable and structured with it.
Yeah, no, I've definitely got drunk monkey chatter going on. I'm very much that very much in the head.
Yeah, it's that Mars Mercury conjunction.
Very
Yeah.
much. Yeah, yeah. Oh wow.
So how you would deal with that is because the energies are combined, it's a conjunction. It's very difficult to separate the two. So it's about becoming consciously aware of which is my Mars energy, which is my Mercury energy, which is my drives, my assertion, my will, the way I handle conflict, and which is my logic, my thoughts, my work, my mind, and try to separate the two by using that dynamic tension of the square to Saturn. Okay, just briefly, because I think we're coming up to time, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. So
I'll just briefly run over transits. So any transits to those houses will have an effect. So, for example, if you've got Uranus, which is the great awakener or the great destabilizer, affecting one of those planets, he will wake you up. And he will wake you up by shaking you and destabilizing you. And similarly, Uranus making an aspect to any of the personal planets, the sun, the moon, the Mercury, Venus, or Mars, again, he will shake things up, and you will likely feel very ungrounded, unrooted, unstable, unsafe potentially as well. Letting go. Pluto transits, they force us to let go. One thing that happens to everybody at what's known as the midlife crisis, we've got a Neptune square, which is a big surrender, a big letting go. We've got the Pluto square, which again, it's like a purging of those, elimination of those toxic sort of attitudes, behaviors, beliefs, another big letting go. And then Uranus opposition, which wakes us up. And that's the big one. That's when that Uranus opposition hits. That's when quite often, you know, people go out and divorce their wives and buy the sports car because they're not working with the energy consciously. So those transits can help us to look at through life what's going on. So that, in a nutshell, the astrology of the root chakra and how the astrology can help deal with that. And of course, sort of having the knowledge of your chart and looking at that, and looking at what things, and you can then look at remedies to that as well. So if you've got too much energy focused in one area, you can consciously choose to focus your energy in another area so that you create the balance, create the balance in your grounded stability. So yeah, thank you.
wow, that was pretty wild. I wasn't really wild. And seriously, it's what am I going to say? I'm just sort of, I find it rather entertaining. Is the only way for me to say it. What you've just said there. I mean, I offered that up just as to make it a little bit easier. It was, you've just literally defined who I have been and who I am. That's hilarious. So, and I've always been. So this is interesting. So I've always been very spiritual, but I have this thing about remaining grounded.
Mm.
Oh,
So again, that's Sagittarius.
yeah,
Sagittarius is spirituality.
yeah,
and Jupiter there as well.
Mhm.
It's truth seeker.
Definitely. So
And that's
much.
a very core part. Yeah, yeah. But again, with an astrology session, you can just go deeper and deeper and
Yeah,
deeper. And where did this come from? And where did that come from? And how does it play out? It's a phenomenal thing. Yeah.
completely,
So
completely.
there's a lot that we've covered in that one, because I've sort of covered the introduction with the modes and the hemispheres as
Mhm,
well.
mhm.
Going through the other chakras, I would suggest that you know, as we do the future months, everybody watch this one first. If you've not seen it yet, watch it before watching the others, just to get that sort of basics for the modes and the hemispheres, because I won't repeat that each time, or if I do, I'll just whiz over it very quickly. So yeah, next month we will be looking at the sacral chakra. Is that right?
Yeah.
What we in with July, August?
Oh, no, actually, so even though today is the 1st of July, I got the calendar completely wrong for June. That's why we've got Roz on the 1st of the month. It was meant to be the last Thursday of the month. So we will have another one the last Thursday of July. So we can possibly go a little bit deeper into what we were talking about here, and maybe we're focusing more on the letting go aspects. How can we utilize, what can, we can do, how we can utilize our charts, astrology, for go releasing the things that we don't need. So yeah, and potentially, we can have somebody with a sample of, I've lost you. I'm just trying to get you back here. If there's somebody who joins us, if they have a chart, we can utilize that as an example.
Yeah, if they're willing to do that, that's great. If not, we could actually get a chart for the moment. We could get a chart for the time of.
Oh yeah, that would be fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. Yeah, that's great.
I've got some tarot cards here. I thought I'll get them out as a visual image of. Okay.
Go on.
So Saturn in the 4th house, so too much structure, too much stability. It's the devil, it's bondage.
Yeah.
And the opposite, when not enough, we've got the Tower. So when that root chakra and 2nd, 4th house stuff is in balance, I picked out 3 actually to put them together. We've got the Empress, the 9 of Pentacles, and the 6 of Pentacles. The 6 sort of being the key one, really. So it's all those material needs in place, but in balance, and the ability to give generously and not be miserly with those things. So yeah, I just thought it's a little visual. I'll dig those out as well.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Roz. I just, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, I've put in the comments below, it's right in the description of the video, you'll find all of the links to find and connect with Roz if you're interested in anything that she does, as well as a link to our private Facebook group. So yeah, and if you have any questions, please do pop them in to either the Facebook thread or into the YouTube thread, and we will do our best to get those answered as quickly as possible.
I think it's probably there was a Facebook thread that you tagged me in, I think, wasn't there? So it's probably if you put them in comments in that one, that's probably best, because I'll get an alert from that. And I don't go on Facebook unless I'm alerted to.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
Poke me.
It distracts us too much. So, all right. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. And yeah, looking forward to the yoga sessions and the other things going on in your Wellbeing Collective over the month.
Yes, we've got quite a bit coming up again this month. So fabulous. Thank you. Hold on. Let me just disconnect this.